Warning: this video contains flashing images that may trigger seizures in those with photosensitive epilepsy. Viewer discretion is advised.
What constitutes the perfect crime? Is it the fact that it goes undetected, or that it has no clues? The crime where the perpetrator never gets caught. One such crime are the Hinterkaifeck Murders. Weidhofen, Bavaria, approximately 70 kilometers north of Munich. An isolated farmstead stands against the backdrop of a quiet town. The year is 1922. Victoria Gabriel, a 35-year-old widow, owned the Hinterkaifeck farmstead. She had 2 children. Her daughter, Kazilia, was 7, and her son, Joseph, was 2. Victoria's elderly parents, Andreas Gruber, 64, and his wife, Kazilia Gruber, 72, also lived and helped out at the farm. At the end of March, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner joined the family. Strange happenings had been occurring in and around Hinterkaifeck before the attack. The family's former maid, Crescens Rieger, left 6 months earlier. She worked for the family from November 1920 to about September 1921. She later claimed that she left because she believed the house was haunted, but before quitting her job, she heard strange noises coming from the attic and had seen flickering lights coming from the barn. She also felt as though someone had been watching her. No evidence of this was ever found. Strange occurrences continued when in March 1922, Andreas Gruber found a strange Munich newspaper on the property. He did not remember buying it, and initially thought that the postman had lost it. However, this was not the case. It was later confirmed that no one in the area subscribed to that paper. One other strange occurrence were the missing keys. It seemed like they started to vanish into thin air. No matter how hard they looked, the family never found them. Some days before the murders, Gruber told his neighbors about tracks in freshly fallen snow. They led from the forest to a broken door lock on one of the farm's machine rooms. The strange thing about this was that there were no tracks leading away from the barn. During the same night, Gruber heard footsteps in the attic. But when he searched for whoever was there, no one was found. Although he told several people about these alleged observations, no official report of them exists because Gruber refused help and did not disclose important details that could have helped authorities identify the culprit. The day before the murders, March 30th, according to a school friend of the 7-year-old Kazilia Gabriel, Victoria had fled the farm that night after a violent quarrel. she was only found hours later, alone in the forest. On Friday, March 31st, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at the farm in the afternoon. She was escorted by her sister, and after a short stay with the family, left that evening. She was the last person to have seen her sister Maria and the Gabriel family alive. Sometime after Maria's sister left, possibly late in the evening, Victoria, 7-year-old Kazilia, and her parents were somehow lured from the house to the family barn, through the stable passage. It appears likely that something in the stables unsettled the animals, causing them to make a ruckus, or even cries from a person. And that's why they were drawn to the barn. After entering, they were mercilessly attacked. The struggle and shock that ensued most likely hindered their abilities to defend themselves, and one by one, they succumbed to the violence of the attack. The family was killed with brutal blows to their heads. After murdering 4 members of the family, the sight was set on the other 2 occupants of the house. Quietly entering into the living quarters, where, with the same murder weapon, Victoria's son, Joseph, aged just 2, was attacked and killed. He was peacefully sleeping in his bassinet, unaware of the slaughter that had just occurred outside. The last person killed was the new maid Maria, who only joined the family a few hours earlier. She, like Joseph, was also peacefully sleeping in her bedchamber. And thus the night went silent again. A while after the incident, Michael Plockel passed by Hinterkaifeck and noticed that the oven had been recently used. A shadowy figure approached him with a lamp, then shined the bright light directly at him, causing Plockel to hurry away in distress. Before leaving, Plockel detected a foul odor coming from the chimney. He, however, could not determine what that stench was. The Gabriel family were quite hard-working people, but often they kept to themselves. So it was no surprise that some time had to pass for the local community to start noticing their absence, whether it was in church, or the schools the children attended. April 1st. In the early hours of the morning, Simon Reislander, the farmer and local butcher, noticed 2 mysterious people while he was heading home close to Brunnen. When they noticed him, they quickly turned away, making it impossible to recognize their faces. It was unusual for the family farm to be so still and quiet. The normal barking of their beloved family dog had ceased, and the mailman, Joseph Mayer, left the day's deliveries on the doorstep, where they remained untouched. Something was definitely off at the property. Some time later, coffee sellers Hans and Edward Skyrovsky arrived in Hinterkaifeck to take an order. When no one responded to the knocks on the door and the windows, they walked around the farm looking for the family. However, some time later they gave up searching after finding no one, but before they left, they noticed that the gate to the machine house was open. That was the only thing that they noticed. Sunday, April 2nd, the Gabriel family hadn't shown up to church. It was a strange turn of events, since they always showed up to morning mass. It was very rare that they missed a service. Monday, April 3rd, 7-year-old Kazilia, who has been attending school at her local elementary in her hometown, was absent without excuse that day. This was very unusual for her since she always attended school, and never missed a day. Tuesday, April 4th, Albert Hoffner, an assembler, made his way in the morning to the Hinterkaifeck farm to fix the motor of the food processor. He looked around the farm and shouted out for someone, but there was nobody in sight. All that could be heard were the noises of the livestock and the barking of the dog from the barn. After waiting for an hour, he made up his mind to begin his repair job, which he finished in approximately 4.5 hours. During his entire stay, he did not witness anything. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, Lorenz Schlittenbauer dispatched his sons Johann, age 16, and Joseph, age 9, to Hinterkaifeck in an attempt to get in touch with the family. After being told that there was no one there, Schlittenbauer, accompanied by Michael Pohl and Jacob Sigel, headed to the farm soon thereafter. Upon entering the barn, under a board covered with hay, the men found Andreas Gruber, his wife Kazilia, who showed strangulation marks on her neck, their daughter Victoria Gabriel, and their grandchild Kazilia. 4 members of the Gruber family lay bludgeoned to death under the hay. All of them showed signs of massive head trauma, and their skulls and faces lay crushed. After searching the barn, they moved to search the house, through the hallway that connected the barn to the house. It wasn't long after entering the house they located the chambermaid, Maria Baumgartner, and the youngest family member, Victoria's son Joseph, who lay lifeless in his crib. It was clear that they had suffered some form of traumatic head injury, their bodies testament to the brutality of their assailants. The small rural town was in shock as news of the horrific scene at the farmstead quickly spread. Locals had soon arrived and were wandering around, gawking at the bodies and disturbingly tampering with evidence. It was not long until someone called the local police department to report what had happened. Inspector George Reingruber of the Munich Police Department was tasked to find out who was responsible for the killings. Reingruber drove from Munich and arrived at the farmhouse after a few hours. He took the time to carefully examine the area and observe any details that may be important. The case proved overall very confusing. Wednesday, April 5th, the day following the discovery of the Gabriel family. Court Dr. Johann Baptist Ommeler conducted post-mortems in the barn. He discovered that all 4 members had been killed by blows to their heads with a blunt instrument. It was also evident that Kazilia had survived the initial attack for some time, as her hair was discovered scattered in the straw, which she had been pulling out in clumps, probably out of some sort of deranged mental state. Investigators concluded that a mattock was probably the tool used in the homicide, though it was not found at the crime scene. A mattock is an agricultural tool with a heavy blade at one end of a long pole. The other end has a perpendicular handle that can also be used as a hammer. There are many different types of mattocks, but they all share the same basic design. The remains of the deceased were taken away and transported to Munich, where they were given a more thorough examination. At the beginning, the police felt that robbery was the likely cause, and they questioned traveling tradespeople, drifters, and people from the nearby towns. However, after an extensive search of the house, they found a hefty sum of money. They quickly found out that robbery was not the motive. Evidence showed that the persons responsible had stayed on the farm for quite a few days. They had taken care of the farm animals, consumed the entirety of the bread from the kitchen, and had recently sliced up some of the meat from the storage room. With the lack of any discernible motive from the scene of the crime, the police started to create a roster of potential suspects. Inspector Reingruber and his team questioned more than 100 suspects in connection to the farm murders. The suspects included locals as well as travelers passing through the area. However, one group of individuals were strangely not questioned: the farm's own employees. Narrowing the list of suspects proved difficult. However, some of the suspects stood out more than others. Carl Gabriel. Victoria Gabriel's dead husband was supposedly killed in an artillery bombardment in Paris, France in December 1914, in the course of the First World War. His remains were never found, and the incident led to speculations of whether he had actually passed away in the war. Victoria gave birth to a baby boy, while her husband was away. Rumors said that he was the product of an incestuous affair between Victoria and her own father Andreas, which was legally recorded and widely known in the village. The court found Andreas and Victoria guilty, and both of them served 1 year in prison. Although there is a conflicting report that Victoria only served 1 month. Following the Second World War, those who were freed from Soviet imprisonment in the Schrobenhausen region revealed that they had been granted permission to leave by a Soviet officer who spoke German and asserted he was the perpetrator of the Hinterkaifeck tragedy. Although the initial testimonies of the men gave their accounts credibility, the fact that some of them later revised their statements raised doubts about their reliability. As a result, many people theorized that this mysterious Soviet was Carl Gabriel, since those who claimed to have seen him after his reported death stated that Gabriel had expressed an interest in going to Russia. Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Lorenz Schlittenbauer's first wife died in 1918, and shortly after, he was rumored to have had a relationship with Victoria Gabriel. It is believed that Lorenz may have fathered Joseph as a result of this relationship. When Schlittenbauer and his friends arrived at the scene, they had to break open the gate in order to enter the barn as all of the doors were locked. However, after discovering the 4 bodies in the barn, he suspiciously used a key to unlock the front door and entered the house alone. This led locals to immediately suspect him in connection with the investigation. Schlittenbauer's disturbing of the bodies at the crime scene had caused much controversy among his companions. Questions were raised as to why he had entered the house alone when it was unclear if the murderer was still present. Schlittenbauer claimed that he was looking for his son Joseph, though many speculated that he might have been given a key due to his status as either Victoria's neighbor or potential lover. Despite this, it is still unknown whether or not Schlittenbauer was in possession of the missing key to the house. When Hansi Blager saw Schlittenbauer at Hinterkaifeck in 1925, suspicions of his involvement in the gruesome murders heightened. It was clear that Schlittenbauer had knowledge of details surrounding the crime that could only have been known by the killer, leading many to question if he was actually responsible for the tragedy. Schlittenbauer responded to the question of why he was there by saying that the perpetrator's attempt to bury the family's remains in the barn had been thwarted due to the frozen ground, suggesting that Schlittenbauer was aware of the conditions at the time of the murders. Although this could have simply been an educated guess based on his knowledge as a local neighbor and familiar with the land. Schlittenbauer consistently defended himself against accusations of being the murderer of Hinterkaifeck, going as far as winning multiple civil claims for slander. He maintained his innocence until his death in 1941. Gump brothers. Adolf Gump was initially suspected of being connected to the Freikorps Oberland as early as April 9. In 1951, Andreas Popp launched an investigation into Adolf and Anton Gump due to the Hinterkaifeck murders. His investigation was furthered when their sister, Crescentia Mayer, revealed on her deathbed that Adolf and Anton had committed the murders. Anton Gump was remanded to police custody following the events of 1944, but Adolf had already died by then. Despite this, Anton was dismissed shortly afterwards, and in 1954, all charges against him were dropped as there wasn't enough evidence to prove he was involved in any criminal activity. Karl S. and Andreas S. In 1971, Therese T. wrote a letter in which she described an event from her childhood. At the age of 12, she had seen her mother receiving a visit from the mother of Karl and Andreas S., who lived in Saddleburg. She claimed that these 2 brothers were responsible for the notorious murder at Hinterkaifeck. Her mother said, Andreas regretted that he lost his penknife. Apparently, when the farm was demolished in 1923, a pocket knife was found that could not be clearly assigned to anyone. Crescens Rieger remembered seeing a penknife in the yard while she worked as a maid at Hinterkaifeck, so it was considered that it could have belonged to one of the victims. Unfortunately, this lead did not turn out to be fruitful. Peter Weber. Joseph Betts testified in a hearing that Peter Weber, who worked with him as a laborer during the winter of 1919–1920, had suggested killing the old man at the remote farm Hinterkaifeck to get the family's money. According to Betts, Weber knew about the abusive relationship between Gruber and his daughter and spoke of this plan. But when Betts didn't respond positively to the offer, Weber stopped talking about it. Bickler brothers and George Siegel. Crescens Rieger, the former maid at Hinterkaifeck, suspected the Bickler brothers, Anton and Karl, of committing the murders in September 1921. During her employment from November 1920 to September 1921, she stated that Anton often talked to her about the Gruber and Gabriel family, even going as far as suggesting that they ought to be dead. She also mentioned how peculiar it was that the farm dog never barked at Anton, which led her to suspect him further. The maid had an interesting theory. Anton and Karl Bickler may have conspired with George Siegel, a former employee at Hinterkaifeck, to commit the murder. According to her information, Siegel had broken into the house in November 1920 and stolen items from it, although he denied doing so. Interestingly enough, Siegel admitted that he was the one who had carved the handle of the murder weapon while he was still working there, implying that he knew where it would be kept in the barn passage. The Thaler brothers. Crescens Rieger's statement implicated the Thaler brothers in the burglary. She claimed that Joseph Thaler had visited her at night and asked questions about the family, suggesting that they had been plotting to break in. Moreover, Joseph Thaler had boasted to Rieger that he knew which rooms the family members were sleeping in and claimed they had a lot of money. Most disturbingly, Rieger also reported seeing Joseph Thaler with a mysterious stranger who seemed to be surveying the house, likely searching for ways to break in. Less than a year after the gruesome murders took place and an extensive investigation had unfolded, the fate of the farm itself hung in the balance. The once tranquil property, marred by the horrific events that transpired within its walls, stood as a haunting reminder of the past. The authorities, in their relentless pursuit of justice, made the decision to demolish the farm in hopes of unearthing any lingering evidence that might shed light on the perplexing case. As the demolition crews descended upon the property, tearing down walls and dismantling structures, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Amidst the rubble, hidden secrets began to reveal themselves, offering a glimpse into the dark and twisted story that had unfolded within those very walls. Within the attic, a place shrouded in mystery, a mattock was discovered, concealed beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories. Its worn handle and rusted blade hinted at its sinister purpose, leaving investigators pondering its connection to the crimes that had taken place. The significance of these newfound items was unclear, but they breathed new life into a case that had grown cold. The investigators meticulously examined the mattock and penknife, analyzing every trace of evidence, hoping to unlock the secrets they held. The new evidence, however, did not bring the answers the investigators hoped, and the case soon grew cold. To commemorate their memory, the family members were buried in a plot in Weidhofen without their skulls. The skulls were lost during World War II and have never been returned. Rising from the now cleared expanse, a small concrete monument began to take shape. It was carefully designed to encapsulate the essence of the farm's tragic history while also serving as a symbol of remembrance and reflection. Despite extensive investigations, the truth behind this gruesome crime has eluded authorities and historians alike. The passage of time has only served to deepen the mystery, allowing countless theories and speculations to emerge. While it's been more than a century since these murders occurred, we may never truly know what happened at Hinterkaifeck Farm on the fateful night of March 31, 1922.